you had been, as I was, on a brief visit to Brussels in December 2016, you would have found a city going about its business. A city preparing for the festive season. Yet you might also have felt, for all the lights, for all the glitter, that there was something subdued about the atmosphere. Perhaps that's not so surprising. After all, Brussels was still recovering from the shock of the terrorist attacks that killed over 30 people earlier in the year. And of course, 2016 was the year in which the UK voted to leave the European Union. So how do we come to terms with those twin shocks, those crises? How do we get an understanding of the roots of the problems, the better to address them? Well, it helps if you can find some high ground and try to get an overview.
Stand here beside the Palais de Justice in Brussels. And if you look out over this wall, over to my left, you can see out over the tops of the roofs across to that region over in the north, that's Molenbeek. And if you look down to my right, or at least if the buildings weren't in the way, you would be able to see the buildings of the European Parliament and the other parts of the European Quarter.
For many people, the very name Brussels is a shorthand for the European institutions. The term is used as a symbol of political power, for good or ill. Yet within this same powerful city, a city with, on average, one of the highest levels of wealth of any European region, there are pockets of high unemployment, poor conditions and marginalisation. Areas such as Molenbeek, a place known today, if at all, as the base from which some of those terrorists who struck in Paris and Brussels set out. It wasn't always known for that. Walk to Molenbeek from the Palais de Justice and you'll come to the Rue de Liverpool. Follow that and cross the canal and you'll find yourself in the Rue de Manchester.
So why were there streets named after northern industrial towns, northern English industrial towns in the middle of Brussels? Indeed, why was Molenbeek in the 19th century known as Little Manchester? Well, it's because, in common with many other northern European towns, including Belfast here, and back my hometown, Molenbeek was once a bustling, thriving industrial area that had drawn inspiration from and indeed learned techniques from Manchester and other of the original industrial English cities of the Industrial Revolution. It had access to coal and therefore steam power. It had access to a canal and therefore could transport raw materials and finished goods. And it had workers. It drew in people from across the country, then throughout Europe, and then eventually from beyond Europe. But in the 20th century, the industries began to shut down.
How did we get to where we are today? How did we arrive in 2016 at a moment of crisis in liberal democracy, marked by the vote for Brexit here in the UK and by the rise of Donald Trump in the US? How did we arrive at the crisis marked by terrorist attacks in Europe and chaos across the Middle East and North Africa? These crises, signs of which you can see nestled alongside each other as neighbours in Brussels, seem set to deepen in the coming years, along with a third crisis that may yet come to dwarf the others: climate change. All these are signs of an unsustainable system. But to understand the dynamics of that unsustainability, we're going to have to dig down to the roots, the historical and material forces that were set in motion sometimes centuries ago, slavery and empire, armed global trade, the birth of the coal age, but which are still playing out today in this, our neighbourhood. And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to look at some of the factors that combined to produce the situation we find ourselves in today, and at some of the people who combined together, sometimes in the face of great resistance, in pursuit of greater democracy. Because it's in those connections and combinations that we can begin to understand not only how we got here, but perhaps what we need to do to make progress towards a more sustainable, more equitable and less violent political and economic system.